Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and in today's video we have my Game Week 15 team selection where I share with you guys a bit of my transfer plans and also how I'm likely to set up for the Game Week 15 deadline. So if you guys enjoyed today's video, please do drop a like, please do subscribe as well, and let's start off with a quick review of Game Week 14. Now I am recording this before the Brighton versus Fulham game and also the Tottenham versus Bournemouth game. So still 2 games to go for Game Week 14, but because I have to get this video out for you guys on time, I can only review my game week performance based off of the games that have already been played. And I'm currently sitting on 64 points. This is after adding the 2 points from Chris Wood on the bench and also 1 point from Greaves on the bench as well. Both of them will automatically be substituted on for Gabriel and Nicholas Jackson respectively because both of them did not feature. So adding in Wood's 2 points and Greaves 1 point, I will have 64 points, giving me a green arrow up to 176k in the world. So again, there's still 2 games to go. Hopefully Verbruggen and Semenyo tops up to that score and helps me to kind of improve that green arrow. But if not, as it stands already, very pleased with how my team performed. Now, I'll speak about those players who have already played. In defense, Saliba with a 15-pointer absolutely killed it. I mean, I look back to my decision earlier on, and he was a player that I brought in as my Trent replacement. It was also a point in time where a lot of people did not feel like they wanted to jump on double Arsenal defense. At that point in time, there were a couple other defenders I considered. Levi Colwill and Lewis Hall were the main ones, but I still decided to gamble and go with Saliba because I felt like I backed the Arsenal defense more than I do the other defenses that I was considering at that point in time. And I just wanted to go slightly different. And thankfully, this has now paid off. So I'm very pleased with this decision to go with Saliba here. 15-pointer. I guess you could say that the way the goal went in was a little bit fortunate because in the set piece situation, I mean, the way the goal happened was Thomas Partey, hit the ball back and it hit Saliba's back and ricocheted into the net. So I do think like there was an element of luck as well, but for him to be in that position, it also kind of, I guess, has an element of skill there and reading the situation in the set piece kind of a play. So, I mean, thankfully enough, Saliba scored, mopped up all 3 bonus points as well. So really pleased with his performance. He's going nowhere, as is Gabriel as well. But Gabriel is slightly different. He did not start the game. So Greaves automatically subs on for him as a 1-pointer. But specifically on Gabriel, he did not start the game according to Arteta because of a muscle issue that seems to be still from that kind of Champions League game that he picked it up right, against Sporting Lisbon. So it feels as if that is a longer drawn out injury than I guess they initially expected it to be. But based off the same quote as well from Arteta after the game, is also that he said Gabriel has a higher chance of featuring on Sunday. Right, so I do think like with him, as I'll mention later on in the Game Week 15 section, it's a case where I'm definitely not going to sell him and I'm more likely going to just start him and take a chance that he plays because he feels to me like he'll be in a situation where if he's not fit to return at all, he just will not appear even as a substitute, right? So he's probably safe enough to just start in Game Week 15, and then if he doesn't, it'll be a similar situation to this week where he drops down to the bench and maybe Greaves comes in for him, right? So there we go with Gabriel, and I'll talk more about him in the Game Week 15 section. For Rico Lewis, he did not start. I think there was always something at the back of my mind that told me this was a possibility because of the minutes that Rico Lewis has been playing over the past few game weeks and also in Champions League as well. So I do think like it felt maybe the right time to rest Rico Lewis. But now that he's gotten his rest, I feel like there's a much higher chance that he plays against Crystal Palace in Game Week 15. So he would likely get 1 more game week in my team. And then from Game Week 16 on, I will have to have a greater think as to whether I want to drop off Rico Lewis or not. Now in midfield, it's Saka with 3 points. Nothing much from him. And Mbeumo also did not return. Mbeumo was the player I sold for Saka. So as of now, that transfer really has not netted me much yet. Saka may be scoring 1 more point than Mbeumo, but it's really about the longer term. So I'm not too fussed about Saka blanking in this game specifically. Now, for Mo Salah, he is just inevitable. I mean, the way that he's performing right now and the level that he's returning is unprecedented. He is even beating his own records that he set in his record-breaking season for FPL points. So 18 points here, mopping up all 3 bonus points. He got 2 goals, 1 assist as well. Just incredible. I also do have to mention that I don't think I really gave much thought to captaining Salah against Newcastle when I saw the Perma versus Southampton game. And there was so much pointing towards Perma being the better captain. But I guess moving forward now, we just know the level that Salah is performing at right now. And I don't think that moving forward, many people would deviate from Salah captain, which may not be a great thing, because then I guess it's another way that, I guess a template is forming, or at least a set and forget kind of a captain situation where, in previous seasons, we had that with Haaland and people did not really enjoy the game in that situation. But the point still stays that if you think that Salah is going to be the best captain over the next few game weeks, then you probably will still captain him as well. So I do think that will likely be the case for the next few game weeks until Salah really faces a tougher opponent. But if not, 18 points for him. He is just someone that I think if you don't have in your team, he's someone you have to transfer in. He plays Everton in game week 15 as the early kickoff. So more on that later on, a little bit more of a discussion on that fixture specifically. For Morgan Rogers, 8 points here. He is a player that specifically I chose to keep instead of, changing up my squad structure a little bit and maybe in this Rogers position having a little bit more of an expensive player. Say, for example, instead of selling Mbumo for Saka, there was a potential I could have worked around my transfers to keep Mbumo and then upgrade Rogers to Saka. But I just felt like I'd rather sell Mbumo, and also Rogers' fixtures from 14 all the way until 16 are pretty decent. And so starting off the game week 14 game already with a return, thankfully he repays, I guess, that kind of a faith in him. But now that I have Morgan Rogers in this position, I do feel like maybe some people would be even considering transferring him in just because he's a decent enabler. I could be looking at, further moves forward that maybe put me in a position where I'm slightly ahead because of this Morgan Rogers pick. So I'm happy with that. And also with Semenyo as well, I actually do expect big things from him against Tottenham. So we'll see what happens. But the point I was trying to make is that because I have 2 cheap enablers in midfield now, both around the kind of 5.5 average kind of a price, I do think it allows me to even consider the possibility of potentially downgrading either one of Chris Wood or Cunha to João Pedro further down the line. That should give me enough money to upgrade either one of Aina or Rico Lewis, possibly to Van Dijk, or even if I can stretch through, then Trent, and that would bring my defense to something like Saliba, Gabriel, and either one of Van Dijk or Trent. So more on those plans later on again, but honestly, I am pretty happy that I have 2 of these enablers here. So hopefully moving forward, they continue to kind of pop off. Rogers does have 2 difficult fixtures after the game week 16 game. But then after those 2 difficult fixtures, he will go on a decent enough run again. So more on the transfer plans later on. I keep kind of going back and forth, but that's because there's a lot of things to cover with respect to each of these players, and I'm trying to cram everything into one video. Alright, so on Perma captaincy here, 7 points for him. The way that he scored the goal, to be honest, was, I guess, a little bit lucky as well. It probably was going in already off of Nkunku's strike, but I mean, we'll take it, right? We'll take it as Perma captainers, and he even posted on an Instagram post. He apologized to Nkunku and he said his FPL managers needed him. So he was right. We needed the captaincy points as well. So 7 points for him. Obviously, it would be better if we captain Salah, but I'm not going to kind of use this as hindsight and say that I even considered Salah even more than maybe 1 or 2%. I really did not go there. Right, so up front, Cunha 2 points. Wolves continues to disappoint, and I think because we are actually paying 6.8 million for Matthias Cunha, something needs to be done. So I'm, as of now, even more likely to sell Cunha ahead of Chris Wood. Right, I feel like I backed the Nottingham Forest more over a longer period of time than the Wolves fixtures, and they will start to get tricky. Right, so I mean the Wolves fixtures will start to get tricky. So I don't mind offloading Cunha down to João Pedro. So we'll speak about that later on. Now, Jackson didn't feature. The, I guess, only downside to the moves that I've made in Game Week 13 in preparation for Game Week 14 was that I sold Alexander Isak for Jackson. If I had not done that move, I would have been, I guess, 11 points more, sitting on 11 points more right now. So I guess it doesn't feel as good. But then I think back to the decision making process as well, and I don't feel as if I could have ever kind of told the future and know that Jackson was going to be benched against Southampton. Like, the Chelsea game against Southampton turned out exactly in the way that we expected it to be, that Chelsea was going to score many goals against Southampton. That was the case. I think it was 5.62 expected goals that Chelsea created in a game where they won 5-1. So I do think like the outcome of that game was correct. But the fact that Jackson was benched, maybe it was also a case where he's on 4 yellows and they did not want him to get his 5th yellow in the Southampton game, and they wanted to save him for the Tottenham games instead. And that's why they benched him. I guess you could justify it like this, but I would have never seen it coming. So I guess I would still have made the move when I look back. So I'm not too kind of hard up on, I guess, missing out on those Isak points. Obviously, Isak now moving forward looks pretty good because he has Brentford next, and Brentford just conceded 3 to Aston Villa. So it is what it is. I don't think I'll be moving for Isak anymore. So hopefully Jackson will deliver with a longer run of, I guess, green fixtures that he has. The only kind of thing playing on my mind is whether we'll see another of these kind of situations happen where a midweek game, and there are quite a number of these in December, a midweek game where he's benched again and Nkunku comes in. I do think it is possible, right? So with Maresca and the scale of his rotation, he changed up 7 players in the starting 11. So honestly, don't know what we can expect from him, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happens to Jackson later down the line. So I will be keeping an eye on that. Not that I'll be dealing with Jackson immediately anytime soon, like selling him, etc. I don't think it'll be that kind of a situation. It's just something that I'll think about and also try to have better bench cover for that. Right, so that's with Cunha and Jackson. On the bench, Chris Wood and Greaves would come in for Gabriel and Jackson respectively, and then nothing else much to scream about on the bench as well. So 64 points for now. Pretty pleased with how I did in Game Week 14. Let me know how many points you guys are sitting on, and if you're watching this after the Brighton-Fulham game and also the Tottenham versus Bournemouth game, let me know in total how you scored for Game Week 14. If not, let's have a look at my Game Week 15 team. So for Game Week 15, I have 1.2 million in the bank and I have 1 free transfer. Now, looking at my defense, I have Verbruggen in goal here ahead of Flecken. Flecken has Newcastle at home, and with the way Brentford are defending right now, I definitely prefer starting Verbruggen instead. But he will be playing Leicester away from home, and potentially Leicester may be having a bit of a new manager bounce under Ruud van Nistelrooy. I mean, they just are coming off a 3-1 win. So I do think maybe Leicester's attack could be boosted, but I'm still going to start Verbruggen ahead of Flecken here. Hopefully he gets something. In defense, it's Saliba, Gabriel, and Rico Lewis. Now I'll cover Rico Lewis first. He has Crystal Palace away, and as I mentioned just now, I do think because he has missed or he did not start in the Nottingham Forest game in Game Week 14, that there's a higher chance now that he'll feature in Game Week 15 against Crystal Palace. And I say this because they do have quite a couple of injuries. I mean, Ake is going to be out for quite a while. Yes, Vardiel could be filling in there as well, and Vardiel has had his rest already. But then there's also Akanji as well, and then I guess that in total affects the structure of, I guess, the defensive unit for Pep. So generally, I think because of how flexible Rico Lewis is, or I guess him being able to play many different positions. He could play on the left, he could play on the right, he could also play in the midfield. I do think there's a higher chance that he will feature in this Game Week 15 game because he missed out midweek. So because of that, he gets this Crystal Palace away game. I think it's a good game for City to keep a clean sheet as well. It's not as if Crystal Palace have been scoring a lot of goals at home as well. So hopefully he gets something. From Game Week 16 onwards, I will have to consider whether to sell him or not. I think what's more likely is that I may just keep him in my team still And then Aina could be the one that I sell first because Nottingham Forest fixtures from a defensive standpoint start to get quite tricky. But from an attacking standpoint, it's not as bad. So I'll cover Chris Wood later on. But I think in terms of selling Lewis or Aina is probably the one to go first. Now, in terms of the double Arsenal defense that I have, Fulham away, I think it's a decent enough fixture for them. Arsenal defense is just so good. Now, Saliba, no injury concerns. The thing with Gabriel, as I mentioned just now, is that we don't really know whether he's going to feature on Sunday. Arteta did allude to the fact that there is a higher chance he will start on Sunday. And this was asked after the game, after the Manchester United game in game week 14, right? So it is, I guess, the most updated news that we have. Hopefully down the line we get more news before the game week 15 deadline. But I honestly don't think that will be the case, and we know how he likes to play mind games, so he's just going to confuse us even more. But what I'm likely to do is take a chance that he starts, right? So if he is not fit, for example, I don't think it'll be a case where he's going to come off the bench. So he's probably just going to feature completely, play the full game, or not get any minutes at all. And if he doesn't get any minutes, I think at least I have Jacob Greaves coming off of the bench playing Bournemouth at home. So I think that is decent enough for me to just save a transfer here. I don't think I want to be in a situation where I replace Aina or Greaves for someone that is less than ideal, because now in Game Week 15, I don't think I can reach the defenders that I do want to reach with the amount of money I have in the bank, 1.2 million. Whether I sell Greaves or Aina, I don't think I can reach someone like Trent or Van Dijk. Or even when I consider Joe Gomez and Kwanzaa, I don't think they are the ones I want to go for the long term. So I'm really looking at Trent and Van Dijk, and I can't reach those options in one move, and I'm not keen to take a hit for a defensive option because clean sheets this season are so hard to predict. So I'm probably going to take the chance that Gabriel starts. If he doesn't, I'm just going to have Greaves come on against Bournemouth at home. So that's my defense for now and what I'm thinking about them in terms of, I guess, transfer plans and future rotations. Aside from Van Dijk and also Trent moving forward, I think there's also a possibility I could go for Levi Colwill. He was the player that was penciled in to come in and fill, I guess, this third defender spot that Rico Lewis is currently filling. But now that Levi Colwill got benched in Game Week 14, where, we saw Maresca kind of totally change up the squad, more than half of the first team players were rested and a new set of 7 players came in, I do think it makes me think as well whether Levi Colwill is as secured for minutes as someone like a Van Dijk, for example, from Liverpool, who I'm so certain is going to start every single game. And I'll also argue that the Liverpool defense is better than the Chelsea defense this season. Chelsea's defense, numbers-wise, have been really good, but I would obviously back the Liverpool defense more, right? So in terms of goal threat as well, I think Van Dijk has more goal threat than Colwill, and also Trent has more assist threat than Colwill. Obviously, both of them are slightly more expensive, but as I said just now, I think because I have 2 cheap midfielders in Rodgers and Semenyo, I could very well maneuver funds to channel it to the defensive position. Now, the danger in doing that, as I've looked ahead, is that it will be slightly more tricky for me to get Erling Haaland back into the team later on. Now, if I do want that to be the case, then I may have to keep some money spare in the bank and go for a cheaper defender. So it really depends as well on how Erling Haaland plays. But for now at least, I don't think I need to make any concrete plans to bring Erling Haaland back in. I did think about bringing Haaland back in from maybe Game Week 18 onwards. So I really have to see whether he's worth it, I guess 15-ish million that we're paying for him. And that will need more time, right, before I actually kind of have a look at it. So we'll see what happens there. Let's have a look now at my midfield. So next up, it's Saka, Salah, Rodgers, Semenyo, and Cole Palmer. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the premiums like Saka, Salah, and Cole Palmer. Now, all of them are going to be in the starting 11 for my team every single game week. They're pretty much no-brainers. And I guess it's more about who I want to captain out of these 3 premiums. So we'll speak about captaincy in the next section, but for sure they will be in the starting 11. Saka is Fulham away, Salah is Everton away, and Palmer is Tottenham away. Now, I want to focus on the structure of my midfield here, which is that I have Rodgers against Southampton at home, a very, very good fixture for him, considering they just conceded 5 to Chelsea in game week 14, and then Semenyo has Ipswich away as well, which is a decent enough fixture for Semenyo. So I look at the structure of this midfield, and because both of them are very, very cheap, it puts me in, I guess, a slightly more unique position than I think many other midfield templates right now have, because most of the templates right now is Saka, Salah, one of Rogers and Semenyo, and then Mbumo and Palmer. And many people who have Mbumo right now, some of them have already moved on to someone like Jared Bowen, for example, a Mitoma, or just someone around that price range, and then the funds are still stuck in the midfield. But now that I have already removed the funds from the midfield in having these two cheap midfielders, I think it gives me an opportunity, as I've mentioned just now, to channel funds either in the defense that I spoke about just now, going for Van Dijk or Trent, or I can bring the funds into the forward positions as well. So I think it puts my team in a unique position. But that said, I think there's also a possibility that if future, I guess, mid-priced midfielders come around that I want to go for, I'm not opposed to kind of upgrading one of these midfielders as well. As it stands, I have 1.2 million in the bank. After this Southampton game, it will be Nottingham Forest away for Rodgers, and then two difficult fixtures after that. You could argue that I could sell Rodgers for maybe a Marcus Rashford if I can, if I can be confident of his minutes. Now, he obviously did not start for Manchester United against Arsenal, so that puts a bit of doubt in the, security of his minutes for me. But I won't rule that out as well. So I guess I'm keeping my options open. And now with Rodgers having Southampton and Semenyo having Ipswich, I think it's a perfect game week for me to just wait and see if more options pop up, whether it's in the midfield, or should I just channel funds into the forward positions or the defensive positions. So roughly that's what I'm thinking about my midfield right now, and also my kind of squad structure and how much money I have in the bank. But I'm really open to any of these moves right now. But I guess specifically for game week 15, my midfield I don't think requires any changes. And fingers crossed, Semenyo comes out of the game week 14 game against Spurs unscathed, so that he will be able to play this Ipswich game. Right. So if that's the case, I won't need to spend a transfer in midfield as well. I can roll this one free transfer. And let's now have a look at the forwards. So up front, no real changes here, even from game week 14. It's Cunha and Jackson. Now, Cunha has West Ham away. On Wolves, they have continued to look very, very disappointing. Now, Cunha was on a bit of a purple patch recently, but that has kind of died down. In game week 13 and 14, he blanked in both of these game weeks. And if you look after the West Ham game, I think there's Leicester and also Ipswich, but thereafter, Wolves' fixtures get very, very bad. As opposed to someone like Chris Wood, where I am slightly more confident of Chris Wood getting attacking returns over a longer period of time, because I back the Nottingham Forest attack a little bit more. And bearing in mind as well, Chris Wood is cheaper than Cunha. I think based off of current, I guess, assessments of both players, I'm more likely to sell someone like Cunha before I actually sell Chris Wood. So penciled in game week 16 was actually the move to do Chris Wood down to João Pedro. But I think about it now, maybe Cunha is the one that goes. So we'll see what happens in this West Ham away game for Wolves. But really, I think Cunha could be on the chopping block. We'll see what happens. And for Nicholas Jackson here, he obviously missed out against Southampton. He was dropped down to the bench. I would think that came down to the 4 yellow card situation, but we don't really know. I mean, Maresca is known to be very, very capable of rotating his squad, and 7 players from the starting 11 got fully rotated against Southampton. So Jackson was just one of those players. So maybe it could be a case that moving forward, Jackson would start, the games over the weekend, and maybe Nkunku starts the games midweek. So that may pose a bit of an issue for my team in terms of how I would need to pay more attention to the midweek games that Chelsea has. But we'll see what happens there. This is a bit more of a unique situation where Southampton, the midweek game, was the easier fixture, and then the weekend game of Tottenham away is the more, I guess, tougher fixture for Chelsea. But if you kind of reverse that situation, and if it was maybe Southampton on the weekend and Tottenham being the midweek game, maybe Jackson would have played that midweek game. So I think it's a situation that's kind of new to me as a Jackson owner, where we've only just seen, out of all the game weeks in Premier League so far, Jackson started every single game week, and only in game week 14 against Southampton he got dropped down to the bench. So we'll see moving forward if we get any more kind of information on how Maresca goes about his rotation. But at least for game week 15, I'm fairly confident that Jackson is going to start, and Tottenham are generally known to leave space at the back. So I do think, like, centrally as well, Jackson is the one that's going to get the most chances, maybe even more chances than Cole Palmer. So I'm happy enough to have him in this spot here. Am I, or would I be more happy to have Alexander Isak now, thinking back, if I didn't make the move? Maybe, because Isak now has Brentford, and Brentford also don't look very good. But the move has already been made. And I will have, this is, I guess, the bet that I've made for myself, and I have to sit in it. So Jackson hopefully gets something against Tottenham away here for game week 15. If not, on the bench, Flecken, Chris Wood, Greaves, and Aina in that order. So there we go for my game week 15 team. And I've discussed, I guess, in terms of transfer plans, when I discussed each section here, whether it's the defense, the midfield, or the forwards, where I could potentially go. So just to quickly recap, I think in terms of defense, if I'm to sell one, or I guess if I'm to pick one defender that I'm most likely to sell first, it would be Aina, and he would go for someone ideally that is a Liverpool defender. So either one of Van Dijk or Trent. That's the one I'm aiming for. If not in midfield, I guess the most likely player I'm going to sell first, it could be as early as game week 16, is Morgan Rogers. And I guess in terms of replacements right now, there's no clear replacements, but the most likely one is a Manchester United attacker, but they will have to wait for their fixtures to turn. So I don't think game week 15 or game week 16 is the time to jump on the Manchester United assets. That would have to wait until game week 17 after the Manchester City fixture for Manchester United. So roughly that's what I'm thinking about in terms of midfield. Up front, Wood and Cunha are really the ones that could drop down to João Pedro for me to free up funds. And I think, as I've mentioned just now, most likely the one I'm going to sell first is Cunha, but let's see how he does against West Ham. So there we go for my game week 15 team selection and also rough transfer plans in each of these departments. Let's now wrap this video up with the captain's algorithm. So finally, for the game week 15 captaincy algorithm, for the benefit of those of you guys who are seeing this for the first time, this is a mini segment within the team selection series where I share with you guys, based on the captaincy algorithm model that I've developed, who the model puts forth as the best captain for this game week. So just to give you guys an example, in game week 14, it put forth Perma as the best game week 14 captain, followed by Salah and then Haaland. Now, looking at the captaincy algorithm, the way that I term it as a success or a failure is simply based on two conditions. Firstly, the captain must not blank. So say, for example, now in game week 15, for the captaincy algorithm choice, which is Salah, for him to be termed as a success, firstly, he must not blank in game week 15. He must have at least one return, so that is at least an assist or a goal. And then, aside from that, there's also another condition that he has to fulfill, in that out of the three best captains picked out by the algorithm, so in this case, Salah, Haaland, and Palmer, Salah will have to score at least 3 points within whatever Haaland and Palmer score. So it's alright if Salah scores below what Haaland and Palmer do, as long as he does not score more than 3 points less than what Haaland and Palmer have scored. Right? Of course, ideally, if Salah outscores Haaland and Palmer, then the algorithm has got it right, and Salah is likely, outrightly the best captain that week, and it's a clear success. But in terms of where it gets a little bit more tricky, then that is how we differentiate whether it is a success or not. So for game week 15, again, how this is calculated is basically I take a weighted average value of predicted points from 3 different sources, and the weight that I give to each of these sources is different based on reliability. So for game week 15, Salah has 6.7 algorithm points. He is playing against Everton away, but the huge caveat here is that this is the early kickoff. and we know what Gandhi says about the early kickoff, right? So drop it in the comments down below how you feel about, the early kickoff captaincy, and, are you going for Salah or are you going for someone else like Perma or even Saka against Fulham away? Let me know in the comments down below, because captaincy this week may seem very straightforward, but I think there may be people giving more thought to it. So drop it in the comments down below who your Game Week 15 captain is. Below Salah, there's Haaland against Crystal Palace away at 6.4 algorithm points. I think that's reasonable. And then there's Perma at 6.3 algorithm points against Spurs away. So that's it for, I guess, the captaincy algorithm. Success rate wise, as I've said, based on the criteria that we laid out just now, last week the recommended captain was Perma, but he only scored 7 points. Salah was also one of those picked up by the algorithm as someone we could captain, and Salah obviously scored 18 points, which is so much more than what Perma scored. So unfortunately, that was a failure. So in terms of contributing to the success rate, Game Week 14, the algorithm failed in picking Perma. So it is down now to 10 out of 14 game weeks instead of 10 out of 13 game weeks. Hopefully moving forward, the algorithm will continue to do well. 10 out of 14 is not too bad if I'm thinking about it right now. If I told you there was a model at the start of the season that out of 14 game weeks would pick you a very good captain for 10 game weeks, would you trust the model? I think I might still go with it, right? So for Game Week 15, it is a close call. I think for now, I'm likely leaning towards what the model is, I guess, recommending, which is captaining Salah against Everton away. I guess it's just the early kickoff kind of voodoo that's putting me off as well. Not that I believe in it, but I think there is a possibility that some people desperately don't want to captain someone in the early kickoff and go against it. So let me know where you stand in these kind of, I guess, decisions, and be keen to know as well. If not, there we go for the Game Week 15 team selection. I know it is a slightly longer video, but there's so much to talk about, and I really only have time to put out one video for Game Week 15, which is this video. So I tried to cramp every single thing that I want to cover in today's video, whether it's transfer plans moving forward, my thoughts on certain players, and also the team selection. So hopefully you managed to watch through whatever I've said in this video and you found some use in it. Please do subscribe, please do like as well, and I'll catch you on the deadline stream on Saturday, 3 hours before the deadline as usual. Bye bye.